Welcome back. So, can you save your marriage when you are the only one trying? Can you save your marriage when you're the only one trying? So, years ago, when Lola, my wife, was checking out of the marriage, it was a struggle. This particular part of the conversation is a struggle, and I thought I needed to do more. Not only that, a lot of time I thought I needed her to come to the table so we can work on this. I leveraged that, or should I say leverage? I took advantage of that to explain more, complain more. I reacted more. I tried harder to correct what was happening by focusing on how she should also show up evenly, and that continued. That made the crisis went for much longer. The other that I tried to get this the worse it got, But years later on, when her and I were working with a client, there's this particular lady. She wanted our relationship to work so badly, but she could not make the other person become equally committed to the process, and that was the initial hiccup that she was encountering before she found us and found our framework. So today I'm actually going to show you something slightly different for what you might be familiar with. All right, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to show you what we call the overfunctioning cycle. The question here is that, can you save your marriage alone, as in by yourself, if the other person is not showing up? The popular belief, what a lot of people misunderstand, is they are looking for the results and they don't want to do the work. Oftentimes, the cards you're dealt is that you have to start the work. Okay, those are real life, right? Eventually, of course, you want the other person, because you don't want to end up in a over functioning. We'll call it. You don't want to end up getting stuck in the over functioning cycle. But this can happen from multiple angles. Okay, functioning cycle. Yeah, that's what. And this usually start off as that state where you are right now. You feel powerless. Yes or yes, you feel powerless. You feel like the other person is not showing up. So this is triggered. We're gonna say powerlessness. All right. But this is the cycle that I want to unpack on this episode. Powerlessness leads to overfunctioning, and then it leads to bargaining. Right? Let's put that here. Overfunctioning. And then it leads to bargaining. Bargaining. Right? Now, something that people always accuse themselves of pretending, but they don't remember this part where you're pretending that this is not a romantic relationship. This is a romantic relationship at the end of the day. The idea is that the person voluntarily wants to be with you, not that you force them to be with you because it's supposed to be duty, right? You want them to want to be with you. So bargaining, of course, when you end up in this place of bargaining, it ends up leading to pressure. Okay, pressure. Now, pressure is not a good thing. I'm going to explain this. Okay, pressure is not a good thing because remember, the goal is that you want them to voluntarily want to be with you. When they experience pressure, that creates resistance. All right, you have resistance, right? So eventually resistance leads to exhaustion. You're going to get exhausted with this part. This is, again, remember we're talking about the overfunctioning, right? This is going to lead to exhaustion. You're going to get tired. You don't have the capacity for what you're trying to do. I know it makes common sense because give or take, right? That's one of the misunderstanding. Give or take is the result. It usually starts off as give. So who should give first? Who is complaining? Who is explaining? That person should give first. Okay, I'm talking about should. The reality is that a lot of people get stuck in a place of contempt and they're waiting for each other. Who's going to give first? Who's going to give first? And then it just gets worse and worse, right? Because they keep waiting for each other, right? And rightfully so. Right? So why did I say rightfully so? Because again, I know you have your reasons why you feel like you shouldn't be the one doing all the work. I've been there, so I know exactly how you feel with regards to that. But that exhaustion is going to circle right back to the same place. All right back to what you're trying to avoid. You continue to feel powerless. It feeds itself. It's a very bad cycle to get stuck in. Okay, so if you can picture yourself inside of this, if this is your marriage, you feel tired, you feel exhausted all the time, and you feel powerless, and the only thing you can attribute it to is that, well, you can be the only one doing all the work by yourself. You're making the same mistake that I made. Okay, like I said, I went through exactly what you're going through, and I want to give you the tools that help me navigate out of it. Not just that was the prerequisite for me to get the other person to work. All right. So as opposed to waiting for them, you're going to be waiting for a long time. Okay. Now, if you just try to become macho and you just try to do it by yourself, and you're probably going to get exhausted, because again, the way you feel, what you feel is unfair. It's fair that you feel that way, right? So you don't want to just do that without making sure that you have the right systems in place. But if that's your story and you're looking to work with me, you can find me at getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Okay, you can book a private discovery session at getmymarriageback.com/discovery. All right, because I'm about to do the breakdown, I'm about to unpack the cycle right now, but you might be in a state of crisis and you see yourself and you can't afford to be waiting for these videos, right? You want to get to work and get this done clean, and you want to build a fresh, better foundation for your marriage. Just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Now let's unpack this, right? It starts off as powerlessness, right? Let's talk about powerlessness. What do I mean by powerlessness, right? Your marriage, you're stuck in a place of powerlessness. You just try to do life with your best friend, right? Hopefully that was your best friend, right? But maybe you're not in that state of best friendship, BFF, right now. Maybe you feel like you're always having you're the one doing all the work. You're the one doing the research. You're the one scheduling everything. You're the one trying to have the serious conversations. You feel like the other person is just a terrible communicator. So you feel like, you're a good communicator, right? You keep bringing up counseling, but they keep resisting it, right? And you keep you're the one always looking for the better way to communicate. You're looking for the right words, right? And you basically become the entire marriage repair department, right? But the effort is not the same, right? It's not the same thing on both sides from what you can see. So you've made a conclusion. The internet might have helped you make a conclusion that the marriage is not unfixable if the other person is not willing to do the work. The problem with that's a very popular belief system, but that same belief system is actually destroying most marriages, right? Because this is an unrealistic expectation of something that never really happens. Like, it never happens where people just simultaneously come together at the same time and they start working on the marriage. It never happens. Like, that's not real. That's not real life. What usually happens is that somebody's going to lead a dance in the direction that they want the marriage to go. All right? Somebody's going to lead a dance. But anyway, you're stuck in this place of powerlessness, right? And so you're overfunctioning. Now, you're trying not to overfunction, but that's exactly what you end up doing, because something that's supposed to involve the two of you to continue to work and live together, and when they say two heads is better than one, now you end up being the only one doing it. But you're doing it from a place of you've shut down. Shut down is the right word. Like, you've tried. So if they're not going to work on the marriage, I'm not going to work on the marriage. So let's just live in a funky marriage for as long as, I guess, we just wake up every day and just live like roommates, get friend zoned by your inside your own marriage, right? Every conversation around intimacy is awkward. You can't, because you gave up. And again, I can't shame you for that. I can't blame you for that. It's not your fault. I know that feeling when you get to a point where, like, I can't keep being the only person fighting for this marriage, right? But here's the problem with that. You often go back and forth between overfunctioning in this manner and bargaining. Okay? You're often going back and forth. There's this very toxic cycle there because, again, you have to live with this person, right? It's usually in a place that you're still in the same household, right? So for my own story, when Lola started pulling away, I did not understand it, right? For me, where I'm coming from, we're supposed to just be adults. Like, people should just be adults and stop playing mind games, right? And I wasn't too familiar with the idea that somebody can actually be emotionally soaked up in BS and shut down. Malice keeping, silent treatment, whatever you want to call it. Like, I don't want to talk right now. Just shut down, right? It basically creates a feeling of rejection on the other side, right? And the at one point, sometimes you feel like if I don't do something, right, nothing will happen. The other extreme, and so you flip from one extreme to the other extreme, like, well, if I do too much, nothing will happen. So that's what creates the state of powerlessness, right? But your brain carrying such an emotional energy when you have to live with that person is what I'm calling overfunctioning. Okay, so now you start to look for proof that your husband or your wife cares, because again, remember, that kind of back and forth, they just using it as a coping mechanism. I've always said, listen, silent treatment, right, or stonewalling, which is one of the 4 predictors of divorce, right? It's a coping mechanism, right? Oftentimes people would do it from a place of semi-subconscious. Okay, subconscious, that's 2 things. Is that semi-conscious or subconscious, right? It's a way for them to protect their emotions. They're either defensive, or they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear the wrong thing. They don't want to navigate that feeling in that point in time. So they'll rather run to a corner somewhere, right? So tough conversations, we call them, like hard conversations, can be difficult for certain types of personality, and this is what they did, right? Now I might say that to you, and you might say, stop giving these people excuses. These are adults. The fact that you said that makes you not an adult, because it makes you just basically an amateur in this game. Because the idea here is like, and I get it, because if you don't take the time to master your own emotions, how could you even possibly have the capacity to understand other people's position? And that's what I mean by a dance, a terrible toxic dance between overfunctioning and then bargaining. So you keep bargaining. You're saying, if you do this, I do this. If you do this, I do this. You get into this mindset of competition, right? It's basically a demonstration that you've lost your ability to influence. Okay, you're basically confirming exactly what got you into this place in the first place, right? You do tit for tat. It's almost vindictive in nature. It's like, if I'm going to do this, you should do this too, right? But let's be honest, that's not what created your marriage in the first place, right? Nobody was keeping records of wrongdoing when you started that marriage. So there's no way that's going to help you fix whatever the issue is, even though common sense might sell you that idea. Okay? The only way you're going to fix that issue is to go back to self, to the basics, how it started. Okay, whatever happens, somebody extended a hand of interest in the other person, right? But there was a seamless, almost effortless energy, a dance between the two of you. You need to find your way back to that, and that's easier said than done. But anyway, that's not the same thing as bargaining, tit for tat. If you do this, I do that. If you do this, I do that, right? And I'm not asking that the other person won't do the work. What I'm saying is that there's a saying I'm trying to get to here, but I'm saying you can't do it from a place of competition. Okay, you can't do it from a place of let's keep going. Like, let's talk about pressure. See, when you're doing that bargaining thing, right, the other person, to you, like, common sense based, right? Hey, we are 2 adults. We should be able to iron things out. Why would any adult go into a place where they shut down and they don't want to talk about their marriage? It's a great question, But once you see 9 out of 10 couples going through the same issues, right, you have to consider that maybe you don't fully understand how the human mind, particularly with respect to human interactions in a romantic setting, maybe you're not fully you don't fully understand how that works. Because what happens is that you're doing that bargaining, your intentions is to fix the broken marriage, but what you're creating is essentially pressure. Okay, they feel pressure. No, it's not something they can explain either. All right, they feel pressure, and that pressure, they don't understand it themselves. So if you go to them and you say, hey, are you feeling pressure, they get double dose the pressure. That's how the human mind works. It's not as pragmatic as you would like to have it. Unfortunately, that's not the human mind. Is not like that. I'm here teaching this because I enjoy doing it. Okay, I enjoy it. It just so happened to be I have experience, right? It just so happened to be that I've gone through this kind of stuff. It just so happened to be it has to do with my calling, right? I have the capacity to impact and help other people with their situation, something I've gone through, right? So that's like a big part of that is mental, right? It's something that if I try to be extra pragmatic about it, I want to become a robot. I don't have the capacity for that. I don't have the capacity to show up all the time and do these videos just from my ass, just because I'm not a machine. Eventually I will give in. But when it's second nature, when it becomes, right, it's a different story. But what you are dealing with is, it's not a matter of is this person an adult or not. Why can't you just have a conversation and iron things out? It's about everything else but your fault. Okay, it's about just how the human mind works. So when you do that bargaining thing, every time you say, if you do this, I do that, what they're seeing is they're saying like, okay, I have to be the one to carry your emotional weight. I have to show up. I have to basically be, that's what they're feeling. So, and if they're feeling that, in addition to the fact that they're trying to, for whatever reason, they're not engaged with you the way they're supposed to be in that marriage, if they're doing that, what they feel is pressure. Okay, and when they feel pressure, what happens? Of course, they resist, right? They want more distance from you. Okay, that's essentially what ends up happening. They will simply want more distance. And no, you're not wrong for wanting to fix your marriage. Again, that's one of the problems. It's not about right and wrong. Okay, it's about right and wrong results. You have to look at your results. The state of your marriage right now, is it wrong? Okay, there's more to the story than somebody is just wrong, right? That's oversimplified, lame way of putting it. Like, no, just do the right thing. Who is measuring what is right? What is the source of truth with regards to right and wrong? Who set the rules? And what and have you broken the rules yourself sometimes when you're in love, when everything is flowing? Have you been complacent, been oblivious, not pay attention, over apologize or under apologize, get defensive? Have you done any one of these things? Have you broken any of the rules at any point in time? So who measures how much I should forgive you or how much I shouldn't forgive you? Or who is measuring how much hurt I am? Do we have a measurement for how hurt I am? Right? So you see, there's a lot going on here, right? So you're going to need to narrow all of this down to one point of leverage. It's so complex, you have to simplify it. So when I mix this universal roadmap, when I bring your own story into it, right, we better be simplifying it to one single thing you need to do right now, as opposed to all these things you're thinking about. So again, you're not wrong for wanting to fix your marriage. You're not wrong for offering resources, for saying suggestions, let's go see a counselor. You're not wrong for any of those things. You're not wrong. Like, them receiving it as pressure doesn't mean you're wrong. It just tells you the nature of human beings, right? You can mean well and have great intentions, but then you could be creating the wrong impact. This is a concept you have to continue to remember. Okay, intentions are not the same as the impact. They are often different. Okay, so if all you take away from this video is the fact that intentions are not the same as impact, I think you will be in a better place. Okay, it just means you will listen more as opposed to just getting focused on what your intentions are. So, but somebody was saying the other day, I think it was one of my clients. It's like, I try my best. I think about people's intentions before I take an offense. I was like, how did you get to that space? Because generally speaking, people don't fall out of the skies with that level of intentionality, right? It's usually because they've learned from somewhere. They've tried the natural second nature thing that human beings would normally do, which is if the impact feels negative, you react negatively, even if their intentions are great. Intentions are not the same thing as impact. So what does that do? The reason why I'm sharing that with you is that active listening is key. Active listening. All right. So active listening can be hard when you're just starting for the first time, but it gets easier with time. It also gets easier when you start noticing that it creates good results. Like if you start having good experience with your partner, of course, you now want to do it over and over because it's clearly creating good results. But it's not common sense. It's not necessarily common sense that it creates good results. Many people will basically react to their impact, and they will also expect you to judge them with their intentions, and judging you with your intentions is usually unrealistic. Okay, now, so we have resistance, right? They're resistant. One of the mistakes you can make is that you're making their resistance, right? It's canceling your ability to influence, right? Now that's a deep stuff. That's deep stuff, but I'll get to that later on. But let me just tell you something. Exhaustion. Let's talk about exhaustion, right? Eventually, you become tired. Okay, when you become tired, clearly you're not able to give as you're supposed to give into the relationship. Because remember, especially when your marriage is in a broken place, what you need to be focused on is give, not give and take. Okay, if you're focused on give and take, you're one of those people, the ingrates, right? Looking for results without having to do the work. Now, you might argue that, but I've been doing the work all by myself. Well, maybe you've been fighting the wrong fight. Maybe you don't have the skills. Maybe you're trying to do too many things at the same time. Maybe you don't know how to identify your point of leverage, right? So, again, you get exhausted, right? You wake up thinking about the marriage. You go to work thinking about the marriage. You search for answers about the marriage, probably how you got to this video. You come home and inspect the marriage to see if any changes, right? You go to bed thinking about the marriage, and because your husband or wife still has not changed their position, right? You conclude that nothing is working, right? You conclude that, and it feels unfair. Now it starts to feel like it's not fair because you've been doing all the work, because you're exhausted mentally. Have you really been doing the right work is the question, right? Yeah. You're determining their participation as a measurement of your progress, which means that your method is not well grounded in the first place. And that's a big problem, guys. That's a big problem. All right. So look, what I'm showing you, what you're looking at on the screen, is what I call a universal roadmap. Okay. This is a universal roadmap. Every marriage has its own unique hidden landmines. If you want me to look at your specific relationship blocks, you just want to go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. The link is also pinned into the description box below, and secure one of the discovery slots available this coming week. Okay, over the next few days rather. Now you're realizing for the first time that you shouldn't be doing give and take. That should be the result. Okay, that's after you figure if you're in a place where you can identify as a broken marriage, you can't afford to be doing give and take because clearly you need to work. Okay, you need to focus on giving. Now, you cannot give from an empty cup. You can't be pouring from an empty cup. You're going to get depleted, if not worse, right? So we need to do this from a place where you don't make their participation or their mood or anything. You don't make that it cannot be the measurement of your progress, right? Because remember, the idea here is that you need to have enough in you to even be pouring or trying to attempt to pour into another person. Because if you go attack this from an angle of give and take, and you don't have enough in you to pour into the other person, then what you're doing is really taking. What they feel on their end is that's why pressure, right? They feel like you're trying to take from them, right? So, and specifically, how does this translate to your relationship will be dependent on your story, depends on where you are in that story, depends on what's going on. And it's easy right now looking at it on the screen. It's easier said than done when you're one of the actors in the movie. All right. Now, with that being said, I want to show you an alternative to the overfunctioning cycle. Shall we? Shall we do that? Okay. So it's still triggered by the same powerlessness. Still triggered by the same powerlessness. Let's go here. Okay, there you go. So, powerlessness. You feel powerless, you feel powerlessness. Right? You feel like the marriage is broken, right? Powerlessness does not disappear because you understand one idea, right? This is real world. It shows up again, in real life for whatever reason. Like I said, it doesn't have to be your fault. It doesn't have to be anybody's fault. And even if it is your fault or somebody else's fault, you don't want to make that your bone of contention. You want to rise above that, because what you're building is bigger than just one individual or one action or one behavior, right? It's an experience you're trying to build. The marriage needs to be an experience where somebody wants to be a part of it voluntarily for the rest of their life, right? So there's no way that understanding one idea is going to help you. Tomorrow, your wife can still say she wants divorce for whatever reason, right? It's highly unlikely if you figure out what I'm about to show you, right? It's very, very unlikely, right? But anyway, from a place of powerlessness, where you want to go to is you want to go to grounding. All right, you want to go to grounding, because that state, it's a grounding. It's a state of vulnerability. When I say vulnerability, not in a good way. Okay, not in a good way, because clearly your partner is not in love with you at this point in time, even though they might love you, right? So you don't want to find your way to grounding, right? Because in this state, again, remember powerlessness, they're refusing counseling, right? They might as well just tell you they don't want to work on the marriage. It almost seems like they're already outside of the marriage, right? The goal is not to create a world where another adult never disappoints you. The reality is that sometimes you disappoint each other, you have disagreements, right? The goal is to become increasingly capable inside any situation. You want to build your capacity. If you build your capacity, right, then you get less tests, okay, because there's all kind of proof that you're passing tests, right? You're not going to get the same type of weak link test that's designed to destroy your marriage. So you go towards grounding, and your first move is not another marriage strategy, right? What most people do, most people like you, what they do is they go start reading. They read all the books, and they start, and you should read book. I think you should read Get My Marriage Back 10 to 15 times. But I'll be careful about just reading and not implementing anything. Okay. So, but the beauty about this book is that it's a real story, and there's also actionable things you can be doing specific to your story, right? But from powerlessness, your first move should not be another marriage strategy, right? You want to come back to yourself, and that's what we mean by grounding. The way you're going to stop the bleeding, which is the first chapter in the book, is to come back to you want to slow down on your reactions. You want to stop treating every rejection, every refusal like an emergency that requires immediate correction. Because the reality is that it is not really an emergency. If you've seen real emergency, you would know. And one of them is not when your wife or your husband says, I don't want to be married anymore, or they're not working on the marriage, or they shut down, or they turn you into a BFF, a roommate. You got stuck in the friend zone, right? You don't feel safe expressing yourself. Grounding will say, well, this hurts, but I can handle this moment, because I know I can handle this moment, right? Yeah, so that's what grounding is, right? So from a place of grounding, you're able to navigate to a place of purpose. Okay, because there's some things you do want to do eventually, but you don't want to rush into this kind of stuff. You don't want to rush into it. Purpose. All right. So what do we mean by purpose, right? The pain of feeling powerless in your own marriage, right? That pain is a ball of energy that you need to now leverage it. Okay. So there's pain involved in this, right? We're not gonna pretend that this wasn't pain, right? So when you combine pain with grounding, it becomes purpose. In other words, without pain, you can't really have a good sense of purpose. You don't have a frame of reference to compare to. It's like when you hear people say good and bad, there's no good without the bad, because there wouldn't be a way for you to reference and know the difference. You're able to know the difference because you've experienced bad before, right? It's like when you see darkness and light. You can't know light without knowing darkness, and vice versa, right? That's the same thing here. Again, the grounding is going to help you redetermine the meanings that you assign to life events, right? Then that drives how you react, how you respond to situations, how you respond to crisis. And if you're able to respond to crisis in more effective ways, you're going to get less tests. Why? Because it creates safety and security. Okay, this generally is going to create safety and security. So when you mix this together like this, right, pain and grounding, it turns out it becomes purpose. That's why we call it pain driven purpose. Pain driven purpose, from practical terms, what that means is that you start paying attention to the things you can control and leave everything else you can't control, which both sides is loaded, right? There are things you can't control and there are things you can control. I'll give you one example on both sides, right? You can control yourself, you cannot control another human being. You can, however, if you're traveling through this journey, right, you can influence another person, right? Because your energy, right? And if you continue to show up in a way that makes other people feel safe and secure, they want to be around you, right? And safe and secure is a big topic that we'll cover more on later on, but it's a feeling. Just know that it's a feeling. Just for whatever reason, they feel safe and secure around you. How do you determine that? You just look at the result. If somebody is trying to escape from you, you can either interpret that as they are, what's the word I'm looking for right now? They are not content. They have the grass is greener on the other side syndrome. It could be, possibly, right? But we're trying to focus on the feeling that somebody voluntarily want to be around you, right? That's where your focus should be on. You should focus on your ability to influence others, influence friends, to actually influence friends to want to be around you, to see value in you. So speaking of value, right, when you are moving with purpose, purpose is things you can control. Part of the things you can control is, if you have children, you can pay some more attention to that, your finance, your work, your life mission, your life work, right? Things that you've always wanted to do. Maybe you want to go to the next level in your career. Maybe there's a side hustle you've always wanted to do. Maybe a calling, maybe some charity work, something that's greater than your own life, something that has to do with legacy, what you would like to be remembered for. You want to put some focus on building those out, because now there's a lot of energy going on here, right? Remember, coming from that painful place, and now you're translating that to purpose, right? When you do that, you're going to discover so much more about yourself. So now we end up in a place called self-discovery. Self-discovery. What do we mean by self-discovery? Well, self-discovery is a popular topic these days, but oftentimes it's people trying to play it safe that use that word. They call it self-discovery because they're trying to avoid risk, right? So they might like, I just stay single and discover myself. There's no such thing unless you're coming out of a toxic situation, of course. So now you have frame of reference. Remember light, darkness. You've seen darkness, so of course you should want to see light, right? Now you can claim that. But if you're just floating through the world and you don't take any risk, right, you can't claim self-discovery. Okay. There's more to yourself that you will not discover until you engage other people in a meaningful, impactful way. And it doesn't have to be marriage. It doesn't have to be, but you get the gist. Just generally speaking, other people that you engage in an intimate, impactful way they will send some test through your system. They will send shockwaves of test through your system, and then you will discover more about yourself, because when you're put in certain situations, that's when you discover more of yourself. So because of the pain, now grounding, the intentional choice to go in the direction of grounding, and then your purpose, and then you start to discover yourself. Now, through this, I've basically reviewed 3 core pillars in our framework to use: grounding, purpose, self. GPS: grounding, purpose, self. If you have this as part of your framework, naturally, okay, well, I wouldn't call it naturally, because you're actually doing the work, okay? You're doing the work. Naturally, you will exude value, okay? And when I say value, I'm not talking about moral values, because all you have to do to have moral values is to claim that you're holier than thou. I'm just kidding, but you get the gist. It's pride, okay? Most people, when they're talking about moral values, it's just camouflaged pride. I don't need to do any work. I'm a good guy. I'm a good person, so I deserve a good marriage. Well, reality tells us that's not how it works, because when you go to the courthouse, there are tons of good people there, right? Good people on both sides of the aisle, or multiple sides of the aisle, I don't know. But value here is what we call the experiential value, okay? Meaning the value you gain from experiencing a person, right? The value that other people see in you. Well, you have to see it in yourself first, yes. So it kind of like, it's a blurry line between that and moral values. But if all you see is that I'm better than other people, that's going to create a sense of pride, and that comes before destruction. Not that type, okay? We're talking about the value that you see where you don't have to assert your value over other people's value. And now they can't help but to see your value, and suddenly they want to be a part of your world. So what does that look like? That looks like curiosity and attraction. Let me put that here, curiosity, because they get curious, because they can see that something, especially if you've been moving mad in the past, right? As in like moving mad or moving too dormant, or you're boring for whatever reason, they didn't want to be a part of your world anymore, right? They're acting weird around you, but now they're seeing something different, okay? They're seeing something different, so they're curious, and that's equivalent to attraction, okay? Now they want to be a part of your world. Now, when you have curiosity and attraction, everything else becomes equal. Not equal, rather, becomes easier. Okay, now how long did it take to get to this place of easier? How long did it take before we get to this place of easier? It's a process. You have to do some work. Okay, you have to do some work. You have to, first of all, experience pain. You have to hit rock bottom. You have to lose everything first before you could get into this space of easier, right? So what happens? Usually people observing, they'll say you got lucky, right? They might say, oh yeah, you're just lucky, and just so happen lucky that you saved your marriage. That's what they will say, right? But they will call it overnight success. They do the same thing with business. They don't know the amount of work, because see, going from powerlessness to grounding is not easy. That's not easy. That's very hard to do. It's easier to go from powerlessness to overfunctioning, right? And overfunctioning is easy, even though why so easy. Why is it overfunctioning? Because it's mentally exhausting. Eventually it leads to exhaustion, right? But this one is hard. This is when because remember, you don't have purpose. When you have purpose, actually it starts to get easier, right? but you're moving from a place of intention now in spite of the pain. Despite the pain that you're going through, you decided that, well, this is not what I planned for. This wasn't what we designed, but something happened. Something broke in my marriage. And this is not the time to do give and take. This is the time that I focus on giving. And who do you give to first? Self. Because you can't afford to pour from an empty cup. Why are you over functioning in the previous cycle? Because you are still pouring into the other person from an empty tank, right? You call it different names, you tell yourself stories to make you feel better, but they're all short term because you're not working on self. Okay? So we have curiosity and we have attraction. At this point, anything is easier because now they're voluntarily coming back to you and want to be a part of your world. And then at this point, voluntary participation. At this point, you get to decide if you want them to be in your world or not. Yeah. Okay. Now, let's be honest. This is the real world. This is still a cycle. Sometimes a feeling of powerlessness still happens, but you know to not go to overfunctioning. You know to first of all find your grounding first. That's the beauty about this. Okay, you know to find your grounding first. Okay, you know to ask yourself first. It takes patience. It takes, well, the more you do it, the more you see evidence that it works, right? The more you create trust. Okay, the other person doesn't decide to trust you. It's how you move that will make them decide to trust you, because you'll be showing up consistently. Not only that, it's a cycle that feeds itself as well. The more you successfully navigate that, it feeds itself because it builds trust, it builds safety, it builds security, right? You're able to ask, am I emotionally sustainable? Because self is the only source of sustainability, right? Am I emotionally sustainable? Am I taking care of myself? Am I engaged with life? As in, like, for real, not just waking up in the morning like a zombie just because there's duty. As in, like, am I intentionally engaged with life? Am I interesting to myself? Can you look yourself in the mirror and feel proud of yourself? That if it's harder in the beginning, but it gets easier with time, especially when the evidence, as in results, start to show. But you also know to have discernment in that space, because you understand that no condition is permanent. But the more you show up consistently in a wholesome way like that, the more people will, the less people will try to test you. Well, the more they want to be around you, the more they want to help you take care of you. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Now, to get into that space is easier said than done. The more you go through that cycle, it creates a compounding effect. Okay, it creates a compounding effect. It compounds out into the experience you're looking for. But in the beginning, you have to prepare that it's going to be hard, because it's easier to react from a place of emotions. Okay, especially when you're experiencing rejection. Rejection breeds obsession, and it just makes matters get worse and worse and worse. So no, you don't need two people. It was a mistake that I made myself in the beginning. I could have fixed the issue a lot easier in less time if I wasn't focused on she should do this. In fact, the first counseling that I booked, I was secretly hoping that they would help me tell her how wrong she was. Right? And that's why most people book counseling sessions. They book counseling sessions so you can finally help them hold their partner accountable. And by doing so, they shoot themselves on the legs. All you need is one person who is willing to surrender, stop the cycle, build their personal power, and inevitably that will start a brand new cycle. They have no choice but to come to the table, because you're not going to accept BS anyway. Okay, but to put yourself on hold, because really, listen, you got into this space not by mistake, right? You got into this space because you didn't have the capacity. And I know it's kind of weird, like, okay, are you saying I didn't have the capacity, or both of us didn't have capacity? The moment you say both of us, you lost your power in that moment. You lost your power. This is a spiritual journey, just in case you don't understand. Bringing two worlds together that has background that you have no idea what you're dealing with is a move of faith. It takes boldness. It's not for cowards. It's not for cowards who is looking always to measure against each other. That's why they said love does not keep record of wrongdoing. It sounds unrealistic, but it's actually the only way to rebuild love, especially if there have been damages. And actually, you don't lose going through that journey, because at the very minimum, you take all the benefits and you share it with whoever wants to be a part of, because inevitably you will create value that will create curiosity and attraction, and the right person will want to be a part of your world. The person you choose to come into your world. So the idea here is to regain your personal power and stop measuring or using another person's word to determine how fast you want to move with your personal progress. Okay, now I get it. There's this force that wants to also always want to make it about the marriage. That's the overfunctioning part. The marriage is a function of a better version of yourself. If you don't fix yourself first, you're probably going to create the same story all over again, just this time worse. Now, before we wrap up, let me leave you with this. If today's lesson you find yourself thinking, I'm describing your marriage, it's true. I am describing your marriage. Don't go back to guessing. Okay, it's everything I share with you, it looks easy. It's on the screen right there. But when you have to live with that person, when you have your world intertwined and you can't move forward, you can't move backward, you're just kind of stuck in a friend zone, in a roommate zone, in your family, in your own marriage. Of course, you already know that's not fun, right? But the reality also is that every marriage is different. And so how we apply these principles to your marriage will be unique to specific stories, background, history, the uniqueness of your own situation. You know, everybody's situation varies. For some people, it's just, I said just, it's never just, but it might feel just on your end. It's defensiveness, arguments, constant arguments. For some people, it's been serious damages of betrayal, infidelity, and stuff like that. Either way, just book a private discovery session at getmymarriageback.com/discovery. That's getmymarriageback.com/discovery. It's also pinned into the description box below. Now, the principle is the same. The principles are timeless. It's scientific. It's predictable. Okay? It's predictable because it's not hanging off of fluffy stuff, right? Just keep praying that maybe someday they will come. No, it's none of that. Okay, it's predictable because human behavior is predictable. Okay, but it's one prerequisite. You have to gain your own power back. You have to get your power back, and you have to. Majority of the work has to be on getting your own power back. Okay. Yep. All right, so yeah, so we've given the same formula to many people and it's working. So if you're looking, if you found this video valuable, please do me a favor. Just hit the like button, share, subscribe, turn up your notifications, and check out the other videos here. But if you're looking for me, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Take care and God bless. Peace.
Are you fighting to save a marriage or a relationship, or simply avoiding to end up in a broken or toxic one?
We've been there and you're in the right place. You see, inside this book, right, you will find and you will discover the secret to save a broken marriage, and you will learn how to build and attract the marriage of your dream.